Imagine this. You're running a brand from a shipping container in your backyard. You've just 5x your revenue. You feel completely unstoppable.
Here I am thinking, brilliant, I'm selling hundreds of pairs of glasses per day. This is never going to run out. I'm going to order shed loads more of stock because this is going to just go on forever.
Then reality hits. You overstock. Demand starts to vanish, and you're stuck with a bank account that doesn't quite match your Shopify dashboard.
I was positive that I've made it. I was going to be rich and famous, but it didn't quite work out like that. There was a trap set in terms of artificial demand, overstocking.
That's what happened to today's guest. From hoverboards to high fashion eyewear, from kitchen table chaos to working inside the $1.6 billion beast Wayflyer, today's episode is a real look at all aspects of e-commerce.
The fundamental understanding of e-commerce probably at a point now where we can tell pretty much straight away, such as the advancement of the underwriting model in Wayflyer.
Join us as Dan shares the hard lessons founders don't post about.
And instead of being able to sell new things to these many customers that I'd acquired during this time, I was restocking the same things, wondering why no one was buying them.
What founders actually do wrong with funding and what you should be doing.
Our kind of underwriting algorithm is able to analyze all of that data, and then funding decisions will be based on that.
How to avoid killing your brand with fake growth, and why your margin is more important than your momentum.
Again, in a world where your margins are being squeezed more and more, if you can really squeeze more sales out of that organic channel, your company's going to be in a lot better place.
It's honest, it's scrappy, it's everything brand owners need to know to make it in today's market.
Have a really clear idea on what the potential return of what you spend the money on will be. What is the opportunity that you think lays before you? How much is it going to cost to realize that opportunity properly? And then what is the expected return going to be if it's taken well?
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel.
Dan, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jordan.
So I just want to kind of get this out of the way with you. Are currently sat in a container, right? A shipping container.
Yes. Well, also working for Wayflyer, but I run a small eyewear brand called everambr from the side of my house. I've got a shipping container in here that I recently acquired, and it's been one of the better purchases of my life. I have to say, it's made a very distinct separation between work and home life a lot clearer. So that it's been definitely a good purchase. Looks cool as well.
Is this a solution then? You just kind of shut the door at 5 p.m. and you never think about work after that?
No, not at all. Really, I'm like anyone. I'm kept up at night worrying about a lot of different stuff, whether Wayflyer, whether glasses, how to sell more glasses, how to speak to more Wayflyer customers. There's things that keep me up at night. Yeah, just like anybody else. At least
sure.
I'm not treading through cardboard boxes in my house, though.
No, it's a better setup, I think. Can you just talk to your background? So obviously you're a brand owner. I think you've had separate businesses before, and now you're at Wayflyer. How did this journey in eCom start for you?
Yeah, so my journey probably started into eCom around 2016. I've probably always been quite entrepreneurial and kind of computer savvy. Like, I was always first person in my class to have Napster back in the day. Couldn't believe that you could get something for free just like out of thin air. So I always knew there's so much value in the internet and learning the internet. And I was always going to go that way. But I think in 2016, I became quite interested in selling stuff online. And the first thing that I did start selling, actually, funnily enough, was those hoverboards that took off for a while. Do you remember? So I think I bought 10 of them from a factory via Alibaba. And it was a really nice introduction to how to communicate with manufacturers overseas, how to source products, deal with customs, sell them. I mean, I would have sold those 10 hoverboards pretty much probably through like my Facebook personal profile and some maybe ad website. It wasn't quite Shopify at that stage, but that definitely gave me the itch. And fast forward a year, myself and my now wife and girlfriend at the time, we had a young child, and our social life was quite dead at an early age. We were probably, I think we were like 25, 26. All our friends were out partying. We were stuck inside watching TV at nighttime. And I said to her, I can't keep watching TV at nighttime. I need to do something productive. So she's a designer. I had this itch for eCom. And we explored some ideas, organic baby clothes, blah, blah, blah. And I actually had a pair of blue light blocking glasses that I purchased on Amazon. And I wore them all the time, and they'd helped me with that screen time that we were experiencing that was having like a bad impact on my eyes and headaches and stuff. And Sasha, my wife and business partner, she said, how about we sell those type of glasses? Because the ones available at the time were they weren't stylish, they were very cheap, low quality. And that was where it started. We sourced products, we designed our first batch, got our handsome and good looking friends to model for us. And we launched a website in 2017 with, I think, 300 units, sold out within a week. And it just really snowballed from there to the point where, yeah, during COVID, we were, well, actually, I'll rewind a bit. We ended up anyway, we progressed a lot, snowballed, launched a lot of new styles and got into a lot of national media. And on a parallel path was Jack Pierce, who is the founder of Wayflyer, who's now left. He was co-founder of Wayflyer. He's now left Wayflyer to do other things. But serendipitously, he came into a pop-up store that I had at Christmas time in 2019 and basically just said, do you want money? I'm starting this business. I'd like to test this business out with an Irish brand. I've been following you online. Can I give you some money? And obviously I was a bit skeptical. I thought this was some sort of scam, but I let him give me money, and I was able to actually buy a lot of inventory to get into our Christmas pop-up store. And anyway, he went on to do his own thing, and I kept track of Wayflyer, and it went, absolutely atmospheric to a $1.6 billion valuation. While at the same time, Amber Eyewear, which was my initial eyewear brand, we'd done extremely well during COVID because everyone was spending so much time at screens. And I think like our sales pretty much 5x'd overnight. It was just myself and Sasha from our kitchen apartment in Dublin doing, over 100 grand a month selling glasses. I was positive that I've made it. I was going to be rich and famous businessman. But it didn't quite work out like that, as a lot of businesses found out post-COVID. A lot of ecom businesses found out post-COVID that there was a trap set, I think, in terms of artificial demand, overstocking. This happened to many, many, many brands, and it happened to me quite badly. So I decided after COVID that with kids, it wasn't practical for myself and Sasha to depend on Amber Eyewear as our sole income. So Wayflyer just raised their Series B, and I thought, wow, this is perfect time to reach back out to Jack and Wayflyer and be like, look, I've had a good adventure here, but I think I need something a little bit more stable for the time being. So that's how I ended up in Wayflyer. And then I've been working on Wayflyer for the last 3 years, while having another go, starting from scratch again in the ecom space with another revamped version of my previous eyewear brand. So
very cool story.
That's my story up to now. I hope that wasn't too long.
Your use of funds for that kind of initial Wayflyer injection was inventory. I'm sure people know Wayflyer as a funding giant. What other kind of uses of capital or purposes behind the capital are there?
That companies would use for Wayflyer? To be honest, like I've traveled like around the world talking to Wayflyer customers. Like it's a lot of big brands in the States, and the West Coast, East Coast, the UK, and pretty much all of it goes back to inventory. I think what I found interesting is when you talk to founders and you do ask that question, you go like, what did you use the Wayflyer money for? They don't necessarily have like pots of money where they go, okay, that Wayflyer money is going to be set aside for this, and that money is going to be for this. It tends to just be that, they're seeing kind of a spike in demand, and they see their growth trajectory, and they see an opportunity. And because so much of your money is tied up in inventory when you're trying to grow an ecom brand, it can be hard to kind of execute on other initiatives or maybe launch new product ranges when, you've got like 3 or 4 months of t-shirts sitting in your warehouse that are literally just like big bundles of cash waiting to be turned back into cash. So I think that's mainly what people use it for. Like it is really, I think the simplest way to put it, and like the most obvious one, is right. You've started a brand, the product has caught on very well. It's growing really fast. Like I can relate to back in the day, like I didn't expect my little glasses business to get to that stage where we were selling in 80 countries or whatever. But when you're growing that fast, and you're a relatively new company, you can't just walk into the bank and go, hey, Mr. Bankman, I'm doing really well. I think, judging by my ad performance, that if I scale this ad spend to blah, 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 I'm going to be making like 5x. So can you please lend me, 8 times my current revenue or something? Well, that's not going to happen in Wayflyer either, but they just won't get it in the bank. And so when you're growing that fast, as good e-commerce brands tend to do, every inventory order is kind of significantly bigger than the last, especially if you want to expand into new markets or if you want to expand into new product categories. So, I think a lot of people have this misconception. It's like, oh, they need money, they must not be doing well. It's actually the exact opposite. Like, you're doing so well that you can't possibly plow any more personal funds or business funds into the inventory that you need. So therefore you need to take in outside finance. And I think, like, with young inexperienced founders like myself, that can sound a bit daunting. But as I've talked to like a lot of different customers around the world, this is something that all the larger brands need to do. You need to do it you need to do it if you want to grow. But in terms of like a use case, like specific use case, I'll give some other ones rather than just like expanding into new product categories, launching new products. We also fund like wholesale brands, so food and beverage. So a lot of the times, what they might be doing now that there's an increase in inflation of the cost of goods, they will now be trying to buy much larger volumes of raw ingredients in order to maintain their profit margins and keep the costs of the raw ingredients low. So that's another use case that I've seen quite a lot since we started financing wholesale brands more and more.
And would you ever see brands looking at using the financing for marketing spend?
Yes, they definitely do, but it tends to, as I said before, it tends to not be like quite as specific as we're going to use that money for marketing and then we're going to use this money for that. If anything, I think that actually the money is more designated to the inventory and therefore frees up more of their own cash to start scaling their marketing. I think that would be probably a more common pattern.
Chunk of cash coming out of the bank account, and that's what the financing is needed for.
Yeah, 100%. And it's also, look, it's not immediate. I think it is that like large once off upfront payment that you have to make. So, with most overseas manufacturers, you've got to pay a 30% deposit up front, and you might be waiting as long as 3 to 6 months before those goods are ready and shipped, and you have probably got to pay that's another 70% before they ship. And then there's like another cost of the shipping. So to get like a new production run complete from deposit to delivery, it's a long time frame and a big injection of cash that you might not see a return on for quite a while. So I think with brands, like, they foresee this inventory need and they approach Wayflyer so that they can make sure that they can get the ball rolling on this inventory run as they need. And I think, that comes with time, with experience, with experience you get better at predicting that need as the years go on when you run an ecom brand. But speed is still always important, obviously, and that's another reason why a lot of people come to Wayflyer.
Okay, I'm going to come on to that in a second, but I want to touch on kind of your story now and how you kind of talk to founders. You mentioned they're kind of potentially over-ordering and kind of maybe overshooting demand. What advice do you have for founders to make sure they don't make that mistake?
I would say at a very firstly, it's understand your unit economics. So understand your gross margin, how much you're paying for your cost of goods. Have a really, really deep understanding of that. I was extremely guilty when I was younger of using the Shopify revenue just as like a kind of a vanity measure. That was my kind of gauge for success of a day, of a week, of a month. To be like, oh well, the total revenue was blah blah blah. But little did I understand that I was paying too much salary to myself and my wife, even though it was quite modest, but we were paying too much salary. I was selling them for too cheap. This is probably a separate thing, but yes, understanding your unit economics and making sure that your profit margin can actually support the other expenses in the business, like a salary and maybe whatever you're spending on rent and etc. So I think that was fundamentally where I went wrong first. And it sounds so obvious, but a lot of people still don't have a gauge on their unit economics. Secondly, yeah, I would say do anything you possibly can to increase the size of your average order value. Another obvious one, but a lot of people don't really do it when they're starting out. If you're paying like, €20 to acquire a customer and then you're selling your product for, 60 quid, After VAT, that's going down to like 43. Take away 20 cost of goods, you're left with €13, and you have to include shipping into that. Again, you might think you're making money, but eventually that's going to catch up on you. And one day you're going to look at your bank account and you're going to see, whoa, why do I have no money? And why is all my stock gone? So that's one lesson. So like, definitely for me, what I have tried to do with the latest brand is to a lot of different strategies in order to increase that AOV, whether that's like bundling offers, small little kind of items that you can be added to cart, even like during the checkout process, like a hat or, you know, an additional lens color or something like that. But through a number of these different strategies, I've managed to increase like the AOV from what it was back in the day by probably about 60%. So within that, that leaves a lot like healthier of a margin for me to ensure that I have, you know, enough money to invest back into the business to keep it growing and make it a sustainable business, because it even though I was doing a lot of revenue before, it wasn't sustainable.
Okay. In terms of inventory management, what advice do you have for brand owners around kind of planning for that next purchase?
Give yourself as much time as possible. I've been at this like 6 or 7 years. Every single year I realize that I need to have started earlier. I think I'm getting earlier like by a month every year, and even then it's not long enough. What else can I say about it? I think what another thing that I do is like, you try and get samples of your new collection as fast as possible over to you, even if it's just 1 or 2 units. And you can, even if even if the main shipping is delayed, you can have some products on hand to start shooting content and getting the collection launch stuff ready. That's probably a big one. That's something that I've leaned on over the years when I've realized that I haven't been punctual enough. I'm sure there's a lot more, but I can't think of any particular ones right on the spot. But just, geez, give yourself as much time as possible. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Shifting lanes now and kind of talking about Wayflyer more. How much of your time is spent kind of educating founders on, you know, products and you know, the financing side of things, but also, you know, the e-com journey as a whole?
Like that actually wouldn't really be my specific role in Wayflyer. That might be reserved for, you know, probably more of the like the salespeople and the CS people. They provide a lot of guidance to brands, especially like smaller, medium sized brands, on how to kind of sustainably scale your business, and that would definitely be more their wheelhouse. But for me, my role now in community with Wayflyer, which is a new role this year, I'm really just about, you know, elevating the stories of our founders. This is kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build relationships, whether online or offline, with our founders, provide extra value to them, whether that's like, you know, events, networking, telling their stories as well, showing like what Wayflyer has done for them. And you know, I think like working in Wayflyer, finance is inherently quite a boring topic, and I try to kind of, you know, say this to other people in Wayflyer. It's like the most interesting thing about working for Wayflyer is the brands really, and like what they do and the products and the charismatic founders who are either like, you know, crazy or super intelligent. Like that's the really interesting part about Wayflyer. So I think what we need to do is like tell those stories. That's what's interesting.
Okay. And in terms of those brands, what kind of size businesses is Wayflyer focused on?
Yeah, it really ranges. Like there's a huge range of businesses that Wayflyer funds, whether that's anything from $10,000 per month all the way up to a brand doing like hundreds of millions per year, which has been the case a few times. So you know, we kind of split them into three different categories. It could be like a startup, and then like kind of growing, one that's, you know, starting to find its feet, starting to become a bit more predictable, starting to understand the inventory cycle a little bit better, maybe branching out into different channels of sales outside of their normal Shopify store. That would be kind of in the middle ground. That probably starts at around, you know, I don't know, 250K per month. And then the next one up would be kind of like big enterprise brands who might have like their own stores, a very strong omni-channel presence, internationalized. Yeah, so those kind of those three groups really.
Okay. And in terms of the process for funding, what does that look like? And is that the same for those different groups that you just mentioned?
It used to be, but it's recently changed now that we have kind of a suite of different financial products for different stages of the business. when Wayflyer started, the way it would work was this kind of like traditional revenue-based financing type thing where you would pay back a percentage of your daily sales. So, your sales could ebb and flow. On a good day, you might pay back a bit more to Wayflyer, and on a bad day, pay back a little bit less. But I think when brands start to become a little bit bigger and more predictable, they like to have kind of a more fixed option there. So that's recently been introduced where brands can, instead of choosing this kind of percentage of daily sales, they can choose like a weekly or a bi-weekly for Amazon specifically, because they get Amazon payouts, or even I believe like sometimes monthly fixed payback. So there is a definitely, as Wayflyer has matured and has a lot more experience with customers, they've adjusted some of the financial products to suit different business needs, whether that's the platform like Amazon, which you only get your payout bi-weekly, so therefore the payback to Wayflyer needs to be different, or the size of the brand. But in terms of the general process, how Wayflyer works over a traditional bank is that we're able to connect our platform into your whole ecosystem for your brand. So whether that's your Shopify store, your Amazon Seller Central account, Google Ads, Google Analytics, Meta Ads, these can all be connected into the Wayflyer platform. And then our kind of underwriting algorithm is able to analyze all of that data and get like a really, really, really strong picture of the health and the trajectory of your business. And then funding decisions will be based on that. And not only does that mean that it's much more accurate than a bank, but it's also a lot faster. And it's also, which we kind of skip over this a lot, but it's also a lot more accessible as well, because you might see some people talk about alternative financing and say, oh, that's so expensive. Why don't I just go to the bank? But the problem is the bank aren't going to give you money. Like, you've only been in business for 2 years. As far as they're concerned, you could go bust tomorrow. They don't have the capabilities to analyze the data and see your trajectory. And you might be able to get some money off them perhaps, but you're not going to be able to get as much money as you need to capture that full potential that Wayflyer can see.
Okay. You mentioned the kind of speed point there. What is a kind of typical length of transaction for you guys, and maybe talk to some of the quicker ones?
Yeah, I actually was chatting to a customer the other day, and he said he's involved in bar supplies, so bar equipment for bartenders and um, bars across the states. And he was saying that his first experience with Wayflyer, he had been over in China talking to a supplier, and this was post COVID when bars were starting to open up. So he went over to China to inform his manufacturers that he needed to scale up production by 50 or 60% to meet the demand. And he remembers walking out of the meeting in Shanghai with his manufacturers and thinking like, God, now the next problem here is how the hell am I going to pay for this massive ramp up in production? And he got on the phone to Wayflyer, and they had an initial call or whatever. And he said that by the time he boarded his flight back to the US, that the money had already been sorted out for him. So I'm not sure how many days that was, 1 or 2 days that this guy was able to like totally fix his whole scaling trouble before he'd even come back from meeting his supplier. But there's definitely some companies that can be done in like 24 to 48 hours if they're like very, very clean and like, everything goes to plan and stuff. And maybe they don't have such a complex system going on.
Okay, and if you're talking to a bank, you'd probably still be on hold at that point, right?
100%. Like another example would be like a golf ball brand in Ireland of who I've spoken to previously, and unexpectedly some influencer reviewed their golf ball and gave it a rave review. So all of a sudden he is in his house going, oh shit, what am I going to do here? This is brilliant, but at the same time I need to urgently get some money because I'm going to sell out way quicker than I expected to. So that's also another type of situation where you can't go to the bank and explain this, and then you're going to get, oh please sir, can you print? You have to sign this sheet we're going to print out, and then we're going to send post to your house, and you'll sign that and you return that. No, it's just not realistic. So in order to capitalize on random opportunities that might crop up like that, Wayflyer, there's nobody better than Wayflyer. Can get it done if you have this specific request and we can see that this is a legitimate need for funding. They can do it like, they can give you a decision within 24 hours, 48 hours.
Why is it possible to move that fast, especially when you compare that to traditional financing options on the market?
It's the fundamental understanding of e-commerce and the underwriting model that they've built up over this number of years. You know, it's probably, you know, it's probably at a point now where you probably can tell pretty much straight away. Such is the advancement of the underwriting model in Wayflyer. That's pretty much why. Like, there's no banks just haven't really moved into this space and tried to understand the e-commerce business model.
Okay. I think when I spoke to someone on the team before, they mentioned there was kind of 4 data points that the model
Mm.
looks at. Can you just talk to that? I think it was looking at the online store, marketing spend, the kind of accounting setup, and the banking software.
Yeah. Yeah, they would be that would be the four platforms that you would need to connect. I think they're the four things that give someone like a really holistic view of the health of the business. But in terms of that, they're not that's not necessarily like what the decisions are based on. The decisions are based on certain figures that can be extrapolated from having those multiple platforms connected. So, like for example, I talked previously about unit economics. I think that's probably one of the first things that our underwriters will look at. It's like, okay, what is their gross margin, what is their net margin here? Like, you know, a healthy gross margin in e-commerce should probably be around like 60 to 75. And if you've got maybe like a gross margin of 30-40%, it's probably not going to happen for you. You probably need to make some changes or up your price or reduce your cost of goods. So, you know, that unit economics piece is one. But then it's also like, how much are you paying to acquire a customer, and how much value will that customer give you? So that's a metric called like CAC to LTV, customer acquisition cost to lifetime value. If I am, and this is a perfect example to explain this, like if I am selling chairs on the internet, and I am selling the chair for $100, and it's costing me, you know, $70 of ad spend to sell that chair, I'm left with $30, which isn't that much. And also, no one's going to buy another chair from me for another 2 or 3 years. So the LTV is extremely low. Whereas, you know, I was recently chatting to a beverage brand in the US who sell their drinks online, doing extremely well. They would actually spend about maybe $50 on acquiring a customer, and the sale is $50. So you'd look at that and be like, oh, they're making no money, that's crap. But then you look at their LTV throughout the year, and it's averaging each customer that they acquire, it's averaging 3 more purchases throughout that year, if you know what I mean. So while it might not look at it on the when you first look at it, but that's a really, really healthy business. Like they're getting customers subscribed, they're paying to get customers subscribed, not making that much money on the first order, but then consistently making more and more orders. More and more money on the next orders that they're not paying for.
Okay. And are these the kind of metrics that Wayflyer will then look at in the model to determine the pricing of that financing?
That's a couple of them. Yeah, I'm sure the underwriters could go into a lot more detail
Yeah.
than I can, but that's one. I think like having a healthy cash buffer in your bank as well is probably a good sign. That's something that that they've said to me before when I've I'm also a Wayflyer customer, but so you need to keep your bank account like a little bit more topped up.
Okay. I know you said earlier there were kind of different maturity stages, or different businesses at different maturity stages that Wayfly can kind of work with. Could you just talk to that and maybe explain, the product suite or the product that goes along with that stage in the life cycle?
Yeah. So again, I will keep this pretty top level because not the best person to go into the ins and outs of the financing terms. Definitely, Wayflyer has recently launched something called Multifund, which is this like suite of different financing products, and they're kind of suited to each stage of the journey. So for the first stage of the journey, that's kind of like a startup brand doing probably between $10,000 to $100,000 per month, and when you're starting out, it can be very unpredictable. Your sales can fluctuate from day to day. It would be quite stressful potentially and risky if you had fixed payments on this. So this is where that revenue based financing model works a lot better, where we can analyze your daily Shopify sales. You pay back each day as a percentage of your daily sales. So that tends to suit that stage. And then as companies kind of mature and become more predictable, they would have something that might be like weekly fixed or something like that, and that's usually better when you might have like different channels working together. You might have some retail partners as well, which are providing more of a steady income. You better understand the your ads, how you're ads are performing and your ads are more predictable. So that's better for that stage. And then I think when you reach a certain stage, which you're doing maybe over $1 million a month, possibly even more, you would kind of graduate as an enterprise customer. And here is when we can kind of set a certain amount that's going to be accessible to you whenever you want it. So almost like a line of credit, essentially. And you can draw from it according to your inventory needs at that time. And you'll always know how much you can kind of draw out. So that tends to be the solution that works best for these like larger customers. So yeah, different kind of products tailored for the different stages of the journey.
Okay. I know that a lot of the brands at the kind of smaller end of that spectrum may be slightly wary of debt. What would you say to them and like help them see that it's kind of the right route to go down if they do need financing?
Yeah, I mean, I never push someone into taking financing if they didn't want to. But what I can say, like authentically and with honesty, is that I wish that I had been more comfortable with debt when my brand was booming at the time. You'd asked me previously about advice for customers to avoid some of the mishaps that happened to Amber Eyewear back in the day, and I talked about unit economics, etc. But one of the big ones was not diversifying my product range enough, and so basically the product that I was selling was a trending product during COVID, and I didn't understand that, and I was selling solely within the market of Ireland, pretty much, which is a very small total addressable market. So I'm selling a low LTV product during a kind of a trending boom in a small market, right? So that's a recipe for disaster. So here I am thinking, brilliant, I'm selling, hundreds of pairs of glasses per day. This is never going to run out. I'm going to order shed loads more of stock from my manufacturer because this is going to just go on forever. But the thing that I did very wrong incorrectly was I didn't see that there was a very clear ceiling on this, and instead of diversifying my product range and being able to sell new things to these many customers that I'd acquired during this time, I was just restocking. I was restocking the same things and then wondering why no one was buying them. It's because they already had them. But I had just acquired thousands and thousands and thousands of customers. I should have been thinking ahead and being like, okay, what complementary products, what limited edition ranges, what new ideas can I bring to the table to get these people buying from me every 6 months, every 9 months? Um, so, so sorry. Back to your original question about what would you say to brands who are skeptical of taking financing? I I actually think at the you're always going to be skeptical of taking financing in the early stages. Skeptical of taking debt. Um, and I just put that down to inexperience, to be honest. And you're also at a point where the inventory orders that you're making at that stage can potentially be self-funded. You might have a few quid that you can put into yourself and go, why don't I just pay for myself? Which is fine. But then you get, some brands, particularly in the US, where they're a lot more comfortable with debt, which they blow my mind when I speak to them. Recently back from a trip to Miami where I was talking to a beverage brand that have grown from zero to 40, $60 million revenue in 2 years, right? And when they talk about the early days and when they saw their product picking up, a bit of online chatter, people were starting to buy it, they didn't take a cautious approach to it at all. They go, we've got a winning formula here. We've got a winning formula here. Let's lean in. Let's put the pedal down as far as we can. And, that's what they did. And they've managed to capture this huge segment of potential that, maybe a lot of brands with the mindset in Ireland and the UK would never have taken that plunge like they did. I think we're a lot more cautious here, but if you've got something and it's picking up and you see traction and people are starting to buy it, people are starting to talk about it, it would be crazy in hindsight to be constrained by your own hesitancy to take on debt, to buy new stock, to pump your marketing, to really try and take advantage of this product that you've got, this brand that you've got.
I think I know this business that you're talking about, and I think what you're talking to here is kind of like if there's a new market opening up, you can, if you put your foot down, take up market share, which you can then defend later if you go faster earlier. And I think sometimes that cautious approach means you might miss out on those kind of opportunities, which are generational, right? That's a once in a lifetime kind of brand.
Yeah, 100%. I think, are you talking about Breeze would be the
Yep.
brand? Yeah. Yeah. So like 100%. And that's obviously a rare case when there is this blossoming brand new market to take advantage of. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be, something, maybe you've just tapped into some like cultural, maybe you've just really nailed like something that just people are like culturally talking about you. Like I see this brand in Ireland. I actually used to sublet an office to them, two young lads, and they started this clothing brand. And I was like, oh, that's a cute little hobby you've got there, guys. But then, but now, 6 years later, I see like every young person in Dublin is wearing their brand, and they have a shop like right in the city centre, and there's always people hanging out outside, like collabs with musicians. They have parties in there, like super cool. And yeah, I just think like when you've tapped into that, whatever that intangible thing is, and you're gaining that traction, like why not lean in? Like why not lean all the way in? And another thing, like obviously about Wayflyer fund financing is that it's unsecured. So they give you money, we give you money because we are pretty positive that you're going to be able to pay it back. Um, but like if you don't, it's unsecured. So I probably shouldn't say that, but I mean it is. So I mean it's less risky.
For sure. Can we maybe kind of flip this on its head and maybe talk to, any words of advice you might have for founders that have now, got that financing of what they should do with it, or maybe some, things to avoid?
I mean, it depends what you got the funding for, I suppose. I mean, a lot of the founders that take money from Wayflyer are far better operators than I am, so it would be kind of it wouldn't be good of me to be giving them advice. But like, I definitely think just don't fall into the same trap that I did. Like, definitely think about how you can, if you've got a low LTV product, think about how you can increase that LTV. Like I've seen a number of different brands, not just in Ireland or the UK, but in the US, catch fire, with low LTV products, whether it's, backpacks, glasses, things like this. And they always hit an unexpected ceiling, and they haven't prepared for what happens when you do hit that unexpected ceiling. Obviously the ceiling's a lot lower in Ireland than it is in the US, so you can make a lot of money before you hit that ceiling in the US. But if you want like a sustainable business, like you've don't just be replenishing the same stock, I suppose. If it's a low LTV product, like look at how you can boost that AOV with complementary products, keep the excitement going with like new drops and new collaborations, new limited edition stuff, like all this stuff to just keep the energy going within the brand, rather than just selling replenishing until the wheels fall off, I suppose.
Okay. I want to shift gears now and talk about the different markets. You are obviously kind of based in Ireland, the business is Irish. You travel to the US, there's a lot of work done with US brands. Where are you guys active outside of that? And where do you see growth in terms of different countries and regions?
Well, the US is definitely the largest customer base and the largest potential customer base. The US and Canada. We also provide funding to German, Dutch, Spanish, German, Dutch, Scandinavian, I believe, and Belgium, I believe, UK and Ireland. Um, I think Germany has quite a big e-commerce scene. Um, Spain. Oh, sorry, Australia. Sorry, Australia would be the second biggest customer base for Wayflyer. I always forget Australia. Um. So yeah, the Australian e-commerce market is pretty good as well. There's some really big brands down there, some really interesting brands. So they would be the markets that Wayflyer operates in. But I think that the kind of the core focus is definitely North America.
Okay. And are these kind of local brands in those markets, or is that brands that are kind of international across them?
They'd be more local. Um, I mean, there is quite a large range, to be honest. Like we have customers who just they might be an Amazon seller, one person sitting in their basement selling potato peelers or something like that, or it could be this like giant brand. Like for example, if I think of like the biggest brand that Wayflyer has worked with over the years, probably True Classic will come to mind. So they're this like men's apparel brand, but and they got to a point now where they've got almost $1 billion valuation. So there's a big difference. There's a big range there. Lots of like diversity within the portfolio of Wayflyer in terms of size, and in terms of like the category and the particular product. Like it's extremely interesting to see what people come up with and what they make a success out of selling.
Yeah. Talking of markets, it does feel like ecom as an industry is going through a bit of a difficult period. You've got the tariffs, you've got inflation. It seems like kind of globalization is on the slide a little bit as well. Are you guys kind of seeing this, and how is this affecting your business and potentially brands as well?
Yeah, I think that the tariffs thing was obviously worrying, from a Wayflyer perspective when it was announced, and just the uncertainty around it, and the kind of chopping and changing of the rate. It's going to go up to 240%. It's going to go back down again. And now it's back to wherever. So yeah, I think there was a period of like 50 days there when Wayflyer were really, really trying to understand its impact. And I don't think it didn't have like a profound effect on Wayflyer and the amount of money that was going out. There was, in general, inventory orders were parked by a lot of brands until this was resolved. And from a brand perspective, from speaking to brands, I know that a lot of them, um, most of them that I spoke to, they would have, the attitude was, let's weather the storm. We're not going to up our prices. We're going to just keep it the way it is and see how it works out. And they would have asked their manufacturers in overseas to just keep the stock maybe in the warehouse a little bit longer until it had been resolved. And that seems to have paid off. And I know our data team have done an analysis to see the number of inventory orders and how they've per day, and how that's changed over the last 60 days. Slight dip, but not actually a huge amount, and starting to go up again now, as you can imagine, because some of them were postponed and now they're kind of bunching up. Now everyone's going to start ordering inventory again. So, very uncertain time. And I think probably from the long-term impact of that is definitely brands are going to start to have a backup plan. They might start to contact factories in different countries, and just have that plan B just in case, because it is quite unpredictable.
And are there kind of any mistakes that you've seen brands make when trying to navigate some of these cost issues?
Yeah. Well, one that went viral, I saw some company had added tariff levy as a line item in the cart. So I would say don't do that. That is, that's something, at least even bake it into your price or something like that. Like just, but yeah, adding like €15 below the shipping line item in a checkout probably wasn't the best thing for your conversion rate.
Okay. And what would you say, in this period where a lot of brands are being very cautious, what would you recommend them to do with any capital that they do have?
What I would say is, I think be a lot more cautious about performance ad spend. I think that the costs of Google Ads, Meta Ads, has increased an awful lot over the last few years, and we're seeing like a massive shift towards brands going back to trying to grow their sales via organic and affiliate and influencer partnerships, and testing out new ad platforms. So while this not might not be like, this is just kind of like a smaller tip, I suppose, for a wider number of things, but I would say test out new platforms and new ways of selling and new channels. Like there's TikTok Shop taking off. There's things like in America you have like Apple Oven, which is giving like a huge return. Fair has also launched an ad network on their wholesale website. So maybe test out different channels and see if you can get a better return than what you're getting currently from Google and Meta, and try and look at some brands who are doing big numbers through like organic means, because again, in a world where your margins are being squeezed more and more, if you can really squeeze more sales out of that organic channel, your company's going to be in a lot better place.
Okay. And is that kind of a general point that you have for brand owners, is, maybe look to businesses that are doing something well and see how you can kind of emulate that?
Kind of, in a sense, but it's kind of like that thing, isn't it? Like, corporate person like in Nike might look at some like cool like streetwear brand that are just starting to go, we want to be like this, but You can't though. It does have to be authentic, and I think people see through it. But there's definitely some kind of inspiration that you can take from brands doing it well. If you want to talk about the organic side of things, yeah, that's a hard one to crack. Like you have to be like a master storyteller, whether it is, you know, like an aspirational lifestyle that you're showing, or whether it's like, I don't know, comedy or something like that. Like not everybody has the creative talent to pull off a hugely successful organic brand channel. But you know, if anything, if anyone's going to succeed in a world of rising costs, it's going to be the ones who can really nail that organic content. You know, for example, I was at an event in the US a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy from a company called, I think it's called Oma's Pride, and it is a pet food company. But what they've actually done is mental. They don't actually talk about their pet food really at all on their Instagram, TikTok channels. They've basically turned their office into a parody of The Office. So it's just, you know, standard, stereotypical, mundane, hilarious water cooler chat conversations. And that's what they post. And, you know, they get millions and millions of views, and they're growing their company significantly off the back of essentially having like a comedy show, not about pet food.
And it's completely
So just like,
unrelated.
yeah, like it's pretty unreal. Like obviously they have some product placement in it, like the odd time, and they do talk about the odd time, but the main channel is like built around this, like the dynamic between the different employees in the office and stuff. And you know, it's that kind of thinking outside the box and just being brave with the stuff you do, and just trying to be different, trying to capture attention. Like everybody's trying to capture attention these days. It's a very, very competitive place. So if you can really nail that down, particularly like it's harder for larger brands obviously to do that, but for smaller brands starting out, like really think about like what are you actually trying to say, what story are you trying to tell, why would people watch your stuff? People don't want to see ads, they want to see stories, they want to see real people, they want to be inspired, they want to laugh. So definitely just trying to like see how you can launch a media arm of your brand. I think that's probably the thing that brands could do in order to keep those margins higher.
Every company should be a media company or have a media
100%.
division, right, in 2025.
100%. 100%. And that's a really hard thing to do, which means that if you can do it, you're going to be in the top.
Perfect. Okay. In terms of that kind of organic marketing or brand piece, then, as a consumer, are there any brands that stand out to you that are doing that really well?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just writing a piece about this today. I think like there's one brand really that for me, someone interested in the running space. There's UVU Running. I don't know if you've seen that brand, but it's the same guys that started Cole Buxton. And there's stuff, you know, that I just think it's a strange one. Like I'm trying to define what these kind of brands do that make them organic powerhouses. Like obviously from the business side of things, they may not have any ad spend at all, but they've got extremely low customer acquisition costs. But from kind of a consumer perspective, what draws people in, I think it's, you know, there's real authenticity with this type of a brand. The people behind the brand are usually very visible within the content, and the lifestyle that they have is very aspirational, or it's very relatable to certain tribes of people. So I think that the authenticity of the founder and the people involved with the brand is like a big kind of signal of these kind of like cult brands. Then, yeah, I think secondly, a lot of the time they would, you know, they do a lot of on the ground community stuff. I'd almost describe it to like having like a place of worship almost. Like if you see like Rafa Cycling, Rafa the cycling brand. This would be another one of these brands where, you know, it's almost tribal. You know, I was in Mallorca recently, and you see cyclists like packed out of their store, which are kind of like meccas to cycling, having coffee, socializing. It's not just a store; like it is the meeting place in Mallorca for cyclists. You know, so it's hard to define what these brands are, but I know when I see them. Like I talked about that brand Emporium in Dublin. That definitely be one of these, you know, Bandit Running in the US, some of the creator led brands for sports in the US, like I think it's Good Golf is one started by a group of podcasters. it's just something that, you know, they don't really rely on performance marketing to push their product. It's more like word of mouth driven, community driven. It's almost like a as I said, like a tribe kind of thing. These are the brands that we see in Wayflyer. Like, they're so robustly healthy from a business perspective. It's definitely, you know, I'd love to say like, oh, you should just start one of these brands, but it's sure I'm trying to do it myself, and it's pretty damn difficult. But there's so many advantages to having one of these type of cult brands. Like, another one even would be the way they operate off like a drop model, which is significantly different to like traditional ecom, where you have, like, you know, almost an infinite amount of product available for as long as it sells. But this drop model, it gives, not only does it give exclusivity, which drives like the exclusivity drives the marketing, but also it's incredibly like healthy for your cash flow. It's like, hey, I've got this specific amount of products that I'm going to sell, and I know they're going to sell out, and that's them done. I'm not holding on to stock for a really long time. So like, even the way they operate with those drop models is really good. So like, a really good business to be in is this kind of new type of brand that we're seeing a lot of. And I wonder why this type has started. Like, you could say it's because of the rising cost of advertising, etc. But I think the people that start these brands, like, they were never really interested in paid advertising in the first place. I think it's just like access to kind of like inspiration via social media has just become so much more widespread. You know, you see people like George Heaton, who founded Represent, and a lot of like young entrepreneurial people would follow him, and they're inspired by him to start their own brand. Like, I never had that when I was a teenager. I didn't really have like a business person essentially that was accessible, that, someone like Richard Branson or something like that was just like a distant type of person. But there's just these relatable people like Ben Francis from Gymshark, etc. And I think that's inspired a lot more young people to get involved in building a brand. And then also, creating content is so much more accessible and cheaper as well. So I think if you add those two things together, and it's much easier now to produce goods as well. Um, that's kind of a recipe for this kind of new take on a brand that is gaining massively in popularity.
You mentioned there something that's quite interesting, given your kind of current role. It seems like more of a focus on community events and stuff like that. Can you just talk to what you're doing on at Wayflyer and what the focus is the rest of this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, it's difficult being, like, I suppose, logistically constrained in Ireland. So hopefully, I hope to get over to the UK and to the US an awful lot more. But I think for us, it's like, with Wayflyer, while our customers have a really good relationship with us, and our CS team are amazing, and they have really like great personal relationships built with some of our customers. But at the same time, interactions with Wayflyer by customers is quite transactional. It's, I need money, and then I'm going to come back in 3 months' time and send you a text when I need more money. And we've just got so many brands that we've worked with, and Wayflyer has worked with like over 5,000 brands, and I think there was a big realization late last year that it's like, there's so much more that we can offer these people. Like, not only that we can offer them, but they can offer each other. So I think that's kind of my job for this year, is to figure it out, whether that's both offline and online. Like, a big online project, like kind of the North Star for me this year, is building out like a kind of an online community for Wayflyer, where we can put founders in touch with each other, build like community forums around different e-commerce topics, and really get a highly engaged community online, where people are genuinely deriving value from it, and genuinely deriving kind of like insight and actionable things that they can use for their store. So I think that's kind of like a big project for this year, and that would also, from a business perspective in Wayflyer, make that relationship more than just a transactional for cash. We would just like have people in and around our website and our community all the time. Would be great, and have just massive benefits for Wayflyer as a whole. And then kind of on the offline side of things, like I told you there, that like a big focus to me is to like meet a lot of customers, tell their stories, publish their stories, make great content with them. I was recently over in Miami, as I said, and we were making a little mini documentary about that company Breeze, that we spoke about, and have another one in the pipeline as well. So there's so much great stories to be told, and it's kind of my role this year to just kind of like eke them out. And then from an events perspective as well, like want to start doing a lot more stuff for our customers, like in-person events. Like nothing can really beat an in-person relationship. Get away from the traditional kind of like, let's put on a dinner or something like that. You know, that's been kind of beaten to death. I'm trying to think a little bit outside the box and do some cool things that our customers like. Not only our big customers, but like small customers in communities and states and countries where there's not necessarily a large ecom presence. Bring people together, get them talking, get them sharing, becoming friends. I think this is all part of my role really this year.
Very cool. Okay. And then just as we kind of round things off then, what advice would you have for ecom founders that are thinking about, potentially getting funding in 2025?
Yeah, I would say know what you want to spend it on as well. I mean, don't just take funding for the sake of it, and have a really clear idea on what the potential return of what you spend the money on will be, the return on the investment. Don't just go like, oh, I'm qualified for 30,000 quid. I'm gonna take that and buy a big massive pickup truck or something like that. Definitely work out like what is the opportunity. What is the opportunity that you think lays before you? How much is it going to cost to realize that opportunity properly? And then what is the expected return going to be of that opportunity if it's taken well?
Okay. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've learned a lot, and thank you for sharing the stories as well and talking about your background. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Nice one, Jordan. Thank you very much for the time.
If businesses want to find out more, where can they follow you, and kind of where should they go to get in touch with Wayflyer?
Yeah, for Wayflyer, best way to get in touch with Wayflyer is probably to LinkedIn or the Wayflyer website, wayflyer.com. For me, I don't really have kind of a personal thing going on, but if you want to follow my brand, which I'm trying to start from basically scratch again, you can follow it at everambr, which is EVEORAMBOR, mainly on Instagram.
Perfect. Okay, Dan, thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. Thank you.
Scaling an ecom brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.